The click of the lock was quiet, but it resonated in Jessie's chest like a loud gong. The key turned in the slot, and something inside clicked softly, like a spring being released. Thomas stood behind him, but made no move, as if he were afraid that any sound would startle whatever was behind the door. The door of the old wardrobe opened slowly, with a long groan of wood. There were no shelves or stacked boxes behind it. Just a dark opening, from which a cold draft emanated, as if it were not just the smell of dust but frozen time. Jessie took a step forward, feeling the air grow heavier, and touched the wooden edge. "Wait," Thomas said quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We don't even know what's in there." She smiled faintly. "That's why we have to find out." She stepped into the opening, and felt the hard stone beneath her feet. As her eyes adjusted to the dimness, she saw a small room, like a closet, but without dust. Everything looked as if its owner had left only a moment ago: books neatly arranged, a cup of dried tea on the table, a calendar on the wall, stopped at the month of her birth, but with a year that did not match the official records. "This is Marlene's room," Jessie said quietly, touching the old blanket on the chair. "I saw that blanket in a photograph, in a notebook." Thomas followed her incautiously, studying every detail. His gaze fell on a chest of drawers against the wall. The top drawer was open, and a familiar silver glint peeked out from it. He pulled it out, and another key pendant was in his hands. "The third," he whispered. "How many are there altogether?" On the table, among the papers, lay a small notebook in Marlene's handwriting. Jessie opened it and saw fragments of phrases written, it seemed, in different years. "They know I hid her here. The key is not the metal, but the moment. When she returns, she will have to choose a side." "Choose a side?" Jessie repeated. She wanted to continue leafing through, but suddenly she heard a soft but clear sound, the click of metal behind her. She and Thomas looked around sharply. The door of the closet through which they had entered was slowly closing. "Who is it?" Thomas whispered, rushing to the exit, but when he pulled the door, it was already locked. "Jessie," a deep, measured voice came from the darkness, echoing off the walls, "you opened the door. But can you close it?" She froze, clutching the notebook to her chest, and realized that whoever had said that had been in the room the whole time. The silence in the room was so thick that Jessie thought he could hear the dust moving in the darkness. The figure stood by the closed door, not moving a step. Only the hood that obscured his face and the silhouette that seemed to absorb all the light from the small lamp. "Who are you?" Thomas's voice was low but tense, as if he were holding back the urge to rush forward. The figure didn't answer immediately. It only tilted its head slightly, and then from the darkness came a voice. "It's not such a difficult question. But you're not the one who has the right to ask it." Jessie took a half step forward, and the floor creaked slightly under her feet. "If you came for me, then tell me directly." "I didn't come for you," came the reply. "I came for who you were. And who you can become again." She felt a chill rise inside her, like the feeling of standing on the edge of a cliff and looking down. "You talk as if you know me better than I do myself." "You do," he said, taking a slow step forward. The lamp illuminated part of his face, and Jessie saw sharp cheekbones, deep wrinkles, and a look that could not be mistaken for a casual one. "Because I was there. The day you were born." Thomas turned sharply to him, his voice cutting through the silence. "This is delusion." But the stranger didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed only on Jessie. "I remember holding you in my arms. I remember the smell of that room, the cold that seeped through the walls. And I remember the first time your name was spoken aloud, your real name." Jessie felt her heart beat faster. "And what is it?" He smiled, but the smile was helpless, as if he knew that the answers she would receive would only bring her pain. "If I tell you now, you will take a step from which you will no longer be able to withdraw. You drove me into this room." She took another step, closer to him now. I deserve to know what you want. I want you to be ready." His voice dropped to a whisper. Because the key you turned in the lock did not open the door to the past. It opened the way for those who are looking for you. Thomas finally couldn't stand it and stepped between them. "If you really know something important, tell me. Or go." The stranger looked down at him and replied quietly. "If I leave now, they will come sooner than they should. And you won't be able to protect her." Jesse felt his words press harder than the locked door. "You speak in riddles. Because the truth is not something you can just say," he replied. "It has to be experienced." He raised his hand and tossed her a small metal object. Jesse caught it. It was half of a key. "The other half is somewhere else. And to find it, you will have to remember that day, even though you don't remember it." She wanted to ask how that was possible, but he was already retreating into the darkness. "When you are ready to remember," his voice continued, "even though the figure was disappearing, you will find me where your mother made her last choice." The door, which had been locked, suddenly swung open. When she and Thomas ran out into the hallway, no one was there. Jesse clutched the half of the key, realizing that now she had more than just another object. This was the beginning of a path she would never leave. The rain had returned when they were in the car. The drops were splattering on the windshield as if someone had deliberately erased the outline of the road ahead. Jessie sat next to Thomas, half of the key in her hands, looking at him as if she were searching for a map in that piece of metal. "Do you know what he meant?" Thomas asked, his eyes fixed on the road. "My mother's last choice place," she repeated quietly. "I don't know. But it sounds like she was making decisions outside the house. Somewhere she went, where no one would see." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe it has something to do with the night she disappeared? If so, we need to find out where she went that night," Jessie said, her voice firm. They stopped outside the old municipal archives. Inside, the smell of damp paper and dusty wood was strong. The woman behind the counter looked at them suspiciously at first, but when Jessie mentioned her mother's name, her face softened slightly. "You must be looking for the records for that year," she said, pulling out a heavy magazine. "Here." She flipped through the pages until she found the one she wanted. There were several police calls that night. One was at the river bridge. "The bridge?" Jessie asked. "What would she be doing there in the middle of the night?" "I don't know," the woman shrugged. "But they say someone else was seen there that night. A tall man in a dark cloak." Thomas and Jessie exchanged a quick glance. It could have been a coincidence. Or it could not have been. They set off for the bridge. The road was blurred, and the place itself looked forgotten: rusty railings, cracked asphalt, streetlights, only two of which were lit. Raindrops reflected in the water, forming sparkling circles. Jessie walked slowly to the middle of the bridge, feeling her heart beat faster. She stopped, peering into the darkness beneath her feet, and suddenly noticed a strange symbol on the concrete support below, two intertwined letters carved in metal. "Thomas, look," she leaned over, touching the symbol with her fingers. "These are the same initials that were on Marlene's pendant." Thomas frowned. "And what are they doing here?" "Maybe it was a meeting," she suggested. "Mom could have come here to give something, or to receive something." She looked more closely and noticed a narrow, barely visible hatch in the bridge deck. It was secured by a small lock, a half-slotted lock. "Will it fit?" Thomas nodded at the half key in her hand. Jessie inserted it, and it fit perfectly. All she needed was the other half to turn. She looked at Thomas, and the same foreboding look in her eyes that she had had the night she'd opened the closet door. "If we find the other half, this hatch will open. And I think there's something there that Mom wanted me to see." Thomas stared silently at the dark water beneath the bridge. "Jessie, what if what's there is what she was trying to save you from?" She clenched the half key in her fist. "Then I'll know what it is." Their search had taken them to the other side of town, to an abandoned service station that had once been used to repair riverboats. The place was fenced off with a high fence of barbed wire, but there were holes in the rusted metal that could be crawled through. Leo, who had joined them after Jesse called, walked ahead as if he knew the way. "Why here?" Thomas asked, looking around at the dark hangars. "Because this is where Gareth used to keep things he didn't want at home," Leo replied. "And if he knows you found the first half, Jesse, he'll leave the other half where you'll have to show up in person." The wind carried the smell of rust and old fuel through the open gates. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Inside the main hangar it was dark, except for pale streaks of light coming through the gaps in the roof. In the very center stood a metal table, and on it was a wooden box covered with a black cloth. Jessie approached cautiously. When she removed the cloth, she saw an old children's toy, a stuffed rabbit with a torn ear. A small envelope was tied to the paw. She untied the string and pulled out a note. "You are closer than you think. But the second half of the key is not for those who are afraid of the truth. To get it, leave the one you trust the most here and go on alone." "He is mocking," Thomas said sharply. "It's a trap." "It's a test," Leo corrected. "Gareth wants to know if she is ready to go alone." Jessie was silent. Everything inside was clenching at the thought of having to leave one of them behind. But the note had a rough plan, an arrow pointing from the hangar to a small dock behind the building. "If I don't go," she said quietly, "we won't find the other part of the key." Thomas stared into her eyes. "And if you go alone, we may never see you again." She put a hand on his shoulder. "If I don't come back, then I've found something worth the risk." As she stepped out of the hangar, she felt the air grow colder. The dock was half ruined, the planks crisp and slippery with moisture. At the very edge, tied to a metal ring, lay a small metal case. She leaned over, and just at that moment a sound emerged from the water, like someone throwing a stone, but instead of a splash, she heard heavy, drawn-out breathing. "Gareth?" Her voice dissolved into the mist. A figure emerged from the shadows beneath the dock. The same tall figure, wearing a dark cloak, but now without a hood. His face was calm, almost tired. He held the other half of the key in his hand. "You came," he said quietly. "And you?" "Give me the key," she said, holding his gaze. "I will. But first, one question. Answer it wrong and the key will stay here." He moved closer, so close she could smell the rain on his clothes. "What will you do when you learn the truth that will destroy everything you love?" Jessie felt her heart pound in her throat. She knew that more than just a piece of metal depended on this answer. Gareth stood so close that Jessie could see the tiny raindrops running down the wrinkles on his face. His eyes weren't hostile, but there was something deeper in them, as if he already knew her answer and was just waiting for her to say it. "If the truth destroys everything I love," she took a deep breath, feeling the cold hit her lungs, "I will find something to love next. Because living a lie is also death." A faint shadow of a smile appeared on his face. He held out the other half of the key to her. "Then you're ready. But remember, it's not just your life that will change." She took the piece of metal, feeling its weight in her palm. When she returned to the hangar, she saw Thomas waiting under the canopy. His eyes were a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Is there?" he asked. "Yes," she said, showing the key pieces that had been joined together. "It's time." Without another word, they got in the car and drove to the bridge. The rain had almost stopped, but the fog was low, hiding the outline of the railing. Leo was waiting for them there, holding a flashlight. "Are you sure?" His voice was muffled, as if through layers of cotton wool. "Things could be different after this." "We've passed the point of no return," Jessie said. She walked over to the hatch and inserted the joined key into the lock. The mechanism turned with a dull crunch, and the lid gave way with difficulty, releasing the smell of old concrete and damp. Inside was a narrow metal ladder that led down into the darkness. "I'll go first," Jessie said, glancing at Thomas. Together, he said, and followed. The footsteps echoed, and the deeper they descended, the more the air felt cold, which had nothing to do with the weather. Finally they emerged into a small underground room. A flashlight illuminated the walls, covered with old photographs, dozens of Jessie at various ages, many of them with people she didn't remember. "What's this?" Thomas whispered. In the center of the room was a table, and on it was a black folder with a red cord. Jessie walked over and held out her hand. "Are you sure?" Thomas asked quietly. She didn't answer. She untied the cord and opened it. Her eyes scanned the first few lines of the document, and she abruptly closed the folder, clutching it to her chest. "Jessie, what's in there?" Thomas's voice trembled. She looked up at him, and it was all there: shock, pain, and decision. "If I tell you, your life will change forever." Thomas took a step toward her. "And what will you choose?" She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and in the darkness under the bridge, she heard footsteps. Someone else was with them.